In this brief lecture, we will discuss what goes into the methodology section of a research proposal or a research paper, a report of a completed research study. Why do we write methodology sections in the first place? Well, the purposes are somewhat different depending on whether we write them for a research proposal or for research paper methodology sections. Research proposals are typically written before we start on the research process. Although in our class we're not doing a full-scale research proposal, you already wrote some components of what goes into such a document. You proposed a topic, a research question you are going to try and answer by collecting data, and analyzing it. A methodology section, also called research design, allows you to map out a path in conducting your study. In a research proposal, your methodology section articulates what exactly you will be doing to answer your research question. What kind of data you will be getting, where you will be getting it, how you will be recording it, and how you will be analyzing it. In research proposals, such sections are typically written in the future tense. A methodology section in a research paper is written after you complete the data collection analysis, so your purposes are to inform the audience what you did to arrive at the answer to your research question, and to provide information for somebody to replicate the study should they choose to do so. Typically, such sections are written in the past tense, and because there may be some changes between what you propose to do and what you end up doing, there may be some differences. There are several elements we include in methodology sections. The table you see on the slide in front of you focuses on the components we typically find in sociolinguistic studies. The first piece of information we need to include is the description of the human study participants, if we're using study participants. The second piece of information is the materials, instruments, and procedures by which we collect and document the data. The third piece of information is the procedure by which we analyze the data. Let's go through these elements in a little more detail. We'll start with the participants. Sometimes you will see participants referred to as subjects, informants, or respondents. All of these are perfectly fine to use, although the term subject is growing less and less favored in research because it implies the lack of agency. When we describe the participants in our study, we need to include the relevant demographic information about them. Typically, age ranges, gender identities, educational levels, sometimes linguistic, cultural, and economic backgrounds, and so on. We include only the relevant factual information, and we use precise and neutral language. When you write a methodology section for your research paper after you completed this study and you actually know the specifics of your participants, you may include a table summarizing the participant information in your paper. Here's an example of the participant description from an undergraduate student research paper. We interviewed 7 native bilingual adults, ages 18 to 34. All participants were first-generation Americans. 3 participants identified as male, 3 as female, and 1 as non-binary. All participants spoke English as one of their native languages. In addition to English, 4 participants spoke Spanish, 2 participants spoke Korean, and 1 participant spoke Mandarin and Cantonese. 5 participants were enrolled in bachelor-level programs at a medium-sized university in the U.S., and 2 participants in the master-level programs. It is also important to describe what kind of data we elicit from the participants and how we elicit it. In other words, we need to specify how we will go about recruiting participants for the study, which selection criteria, if any, we will use to identify eligible participants, and what we will be asking them to do in order to provide the data for us. For example, we need to specify if we will be interviewing individuals or asking anonymous respondents to fill out a survey, if we will be observing speech and behavior in particular settings, or conducting experiments, or asking participants to write something, etc., etc., etc. Note, actual interview or survey questions, experimental task stimuli, or other instruments are not included in the methodology section. However, it is necessary to specify how many questions the participants were or will be asked. or for how long a time they will be observed, or how the data will be documented. Here is an example of a promissory description of the data collection process. It was used in a student research proposal, so it is written in the future tense. This study will be quantitative in nature. We will distribute an anonymous online survey via social media. Volunteers will be asked to scan a QR code, which will take them to the survey consisting of 2 parts. The first part will contain 16 attitudinal statements about the use of swear words by people of various genders in specified social circumstances. The participants will be asked to rate each statement on a Likert scale. Half of the statements will focus on the solidarity scale, that is, the assessment of friendliness, closeness, and trustworthiness, and half of the statements on the prestige scale, that is, the assessment of competence, status, and authority. The second part of the survey will consist of 5 questions eliciting the participants' demographic information: age range, gender identity, level of education, income bracket, and familial status. Finally, we need to include the procedures or tools we will be using or already used to analyze the data. If the study is quantitative, we must list the statistical procedures we're using, whether we employ only descriptive statistics, such as means, medians, standard deviations, and so on, or use inferential statistics to test specific hypotheses. If the study is qualitative, we need to include any coding procedures used to organize and make sense of the data. We will also need to specify which analytical approaches we're going to use, such as narrative analysis, discourse analysis, interactional analysis, critical discourse analysis, and so on. Here's a brief excerpt from the description of analytical procedures. The interviews were manually coded for key emergent themes. After coding the data and identifying categories and main themes, a table of commonly recurring attitudinal themes was created. You can look at the research articles posted on our Canvas page for the common patterns in organizing such information in methodology sections. Good luck, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email.